All right, let's get into Karen Howe's Empire of AI. Now, this isn't just another book about OpenAI. Think of it more as a forensic examination, a really deep look at how just a handful of Silicon Valley elites built what might be the most influential AI institution on the planet. And what a story it is. It's packed with ambition, a whole lot of secrecy, and this constant clash of ideals in the race to build so-called beneficial AGI.
So to really get to the heart of what Howe is uncovering here, we're going to walk through 6 key parts of OpenAI's story. We'll start with its chaotic internal politics and go all the way to its massive global impact.
Howe kicks things off with a bang. I mean, she starts right with that insane governance crisis in November 2023. That single event just ripped the curtain back and showed everyone just how fragile the whole power structure at OpenAI really was.
You see, when the board suddenly fired Sam Altman, it wasn't just some office drama. No, it was this fundamental clash between two completely different visions for what AI should even be. On one side, you had the original, cautious, safety-first nonprofit mission. And on the other, a new, super aggressive, hyper-growth corporate strategy that wanted to dominate the world.
Honestly, the way Howe describes it, the prologue reads just like a political thriller. You've got a terse Google Meet call, a CEO who is completely blindsided, a board that's totally fractured, Microsoft just waiting in the wings, employees threatening to just walk out en masse, and, of course, a global media frenzy watching every move.
So what Howe does here is really clever. She uses this super dramatic moment to zero in on the core contradictions that really define OpenAI. How can a nonprofit act so much like a corporation? How does a mission focused on safety end up accelerating a global arms race? And how can a charismatic leader operate with so much secrecy?
Okay, so who is the man at the center of this whole empire? To really understand OpenAI, you have to understand Sam Altman. And that means we need to go back, starting with his early life and the roots of his ambition.
Howe paints this picture of a classic prodigy, right? He's taking apart electronics before he's even 5 years old, coding early, feeling like an outsider who finds his home in computers. He even drops out of Stanford to build a startup. And while that company didn't exactly take off, it showed where his real genius was: fundraising, networking, and crafting an incredible story. And this is where we see these key themes of his personality start to pop up. This obsession with control, a real talent for charming, powerful people, and this core belief that he is destined to shape the future.
So on one hand, you've got Altman's public persona. He's the ultimate techno-optimist, right? He's promising that AGI is going to cure disease and end poverty. But then Howe pulls back the curtain, and she shows us the harsh reality behind that promise. Massive energy consumption, huge water usage, often in drought-stricken areas, and these incredibly carbon-heavy training runs. And all of a sudden, that whole saving humanity rhetoric, well, it starts to look like a really convenient way to ignore the real-world costs. This myth of progress becomes a shield, justifying all the resource extraction and secrecy needed to build the empire.
So where did this worldview even come from? Well, the book points to 2 key mentors. From Y Combinator's Paul Graham, Altman learned that speed is everything and that growth is destiny. And from Peter Thiel, he soaked up this idea that competition is for losers and that real power lies in building a monopoly. Now, these aren't just abstract ideas. They literally became the DNA of OpenAI. So when OpenAI pivoted from a nonprofit to a corporate juggernaut, it wasn't some betrayal of its ideals. It was the only logical outcome.
Okay, so let's get into how that empire was actually built, starting with its, let's say, contradictory origins.
Right. So back in 2015, OpenAI was born as a nonprofit. It was supposed to be the antidote to Google's DeepMind. And the mission, it sounded so noble. Open research, shared benefits, AGI for all of humanity. But, and this is a big but, Howe shows us that the cracks were there from the very beginning. The founders, mostly billionaires and tech guys, not ethicists. The nonprofit model, well, that was never going to cover the billions of dollars needed for computing power. And that word open in OpenAI, turns out it was more of a brand than a real promise. The seeds of all the future conflict were sown right there at the start.
The really big shift came in 2019 when they moved to this capped profit structure. It was a pretty clever workaround, actually. A hybrid model that let them raise basically unlimited cash while still claiming to be a nonprofit at heart. But what did that actually mean? Well, research went behind closed doors. The models became private property. Microsoft stepped in as the financial muscle. And the idea of safety went from being a guiding principle to more of a talking point for PR. In short, this is the moment OpenAI morphed from a research lab into a corporate empire wearing a nonprofit mask.
And now we get to one of the book's most powerful sections, the hidden human cost of building all this AI. How it just exposes this entire invisible labor force that's propping up the system. We're talking about data scraped from all over the internet without our consent, and low-paid workers in places like Kenya and the Philippines who are paid pennies to filter out the most toxic content imaginable, often at a great psychological cost. This is the dark side of the gig economy that makes AI possible.
How is a name for this? She calls it data colonialism. It's basically the modern-day equivalent of extracting resources from a country, only this time, the resource is human data and human labor taken from people all over the world without any fair compensation or even recognition. The book's argument is stark. OpenAI's entire empire is built on the backs of this invisible workforce.
And all of this brings us to the core philosophy that drove OpenAI's technical strategy, something called the scaling hypothesis. The idea itself was pretty simple. Bigger models plus more data plus more computing power would just automatically lead to better AI. But what How You critiques is the culture this created. This obsession with performance benchmarks, where safety was always just an afterthought. The whole industry became fixated on scale, building these systems that were incredibly powerful, but also not very well understood, and maybe even uncontrollable. So, as you can imagine, AI is no longer just a technology. It's become a full-blown geopolitical asset.
How really shows how the AI race has gone completely global. I mean, it is now a centerpiece of the rivalry between the US and China. National security agencies are actively recruiting AI labs. What used to be academic research is now being militarized, and governments are becoming dangerously dependent on just a few private companies. In this new world, OpenAI isn't just a company anymore. It's a major player in global politics.
Now, the book takes a really critical look at the existential risk narrative, the whole idea that AI could one day destroy humanity. And while How doesn't completely dismiss these long-term fears, she argues they distract us from the harms that are happening right now, things like bias, disinformation, worker exploitation, and this massive concentration of power. And here's the twist. The very idea of AI safety is often used as an excuse to centralize even more power, giving control to the exact same companies that created the problems in the first place.
And that brings us right back to where we started, the 2023 firing of Sam Altman. But now, with all this context, we can see that whole episode in a completely new light. How shows how the whole thing was just a perfect storm. You had a board that didn't fully grasp the technology, a CEO who could completely outplay them politically, a corporate partner in Microsoft holding all the cards, and employees who were way more loyal to their leader than to the original mission. The nonprofit governance model just buckled under the pressure. What the coup really revealed was that OpenAI's structure was a total house of cards, a tiny nonprofit trying to steer a trillion-dollar corporate engine. It was never, ever going to work.
So in the final chapter, How asks the one question that really matters: can an AI empire ever truly be aligned with democratic values?
Her answer is, well, cautious. But her conclusion is crystal clear. It all comes down to accountability.
So what does that accountability actually look like? Well, for How, it means decentralizing power. It means making governance transparent. It means protecting workers and accounting for the massive environmental costs. The bottom line is that AI has to serve the public good, not just corporate profits. The future of this technology is way too important to be left in the hands of a few unelected tech executives. So instead, the book ends with this powerful call to action for real democratic oversight, global cooperation, and public participation to reshape AI's future. As How puts it so well, the empire of AI is still being built. Whether it becomes a force for liberation or domination depends on the choices society makes now. And that's really the challenge she leaves us with. If you got something out of this explainer, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives just like this one. Thanks for watching.